Those smell so good cooking over there. Oh. Thank you.
This scene between Veronica and Savannah unfolds with a disarming honesty that captures the rarest kind of vulnerability. Two young women daring to meet each other emotionally in a world that still struggles to let them. Beneath the casual, almost ordinary rhythm of their conversation lies a tectonic shift. One girl quietly stepping out of shame, and another offering her the radical gift of acceptance. Veronica's confession about her past, the bullying, the gossip about her mother, the cruel way her reputation was twisted, hits with a quiet gravity. She isn't just recounting an embarrassing teenage story, she's reliving a trauma of being made into a spectacle for daring to exist differently. It's a pain many queer women know intimately, the fear that being yourself will always mean being seen as too much. But the film never reduces Veronica to a victim. Instead, it lets us see her strength in the simple act of telling her story. The trembling honesty in her voice speaks to the courage it takes for any queer woman to share her truth when the world has already written its own version of it. Savannah's response, calm and open, feels like the breath the audience didn't realize it was holding. Her willingness to listen without judgment becomes an act of defiance in itself, a refusal to let shame dictate the terms of their friendship. For many lesbian and queer viewers, this is the emotional core of the film, the kind of moment that feels both universal and deeply personal. It's not about romance in the traditional sense. It's about recognition. It's about finally seeing a version of yourself that isn't tragic or fetishized, but simply human. When Savannah admits she once kissed a girl too, the air between them shifts. What was a confession becomes a communion. There's laughter, hesitance, small glances that reveal how both girls are testing the boundaries of safety, wondering how far the other will follow. That shared vulnerability, the quiet acknowledgement of something that doesn't need to be labeled, is what gives the scene its heartbeat. For queer women watching, it feels achingly familiar. The coded language, the layered silences, the deep need to be understood without having to explain. And yet the film doesn't romanticize secrecy. Instead, it treats it as both a wound and a survival mechanism, a reflection of how society forces queer people to protect themselves by hiding what is most honest about them. The way Veronica hesitates before finishing her sentences, the way Savannah gently fills the silence, feels like a dance of trust. Each girl is teaching the other that it's safe to speak, safe to be known. What makes this scene powerful isn't its overt drama, but its ordinariness. They are just two girls talking in a quiet space. But in that stillness, something revolutionary happens. The film understands that queer connection, especially between women, often thrives in the quiet, because the world rarely gives it permission to exist loudly. The fact that this exchange happens in private doesn't make it secretive, it makes it sacred. It's a space where the noise of social judgment falls away, leaving only two souls daring to see each other clearly. And that clarity is radical. For decades, lesbian and bisexual women in media have been portrayed through the eyes of others, defined by men's fantasies or society's fears. Here, the camera simply listens. It doesn't objectify, it witnesses. It lets the girls' faces tell the story, the nervous laughter, the flicker of relief, the glint of recognition that says, "You too?" This moment resonates not just for queer audiences, but for women in general, because it speaks to the universal ache of repression, the way girls are taught to police their emotions, to shrink their truths until they fit inside what's deemed acceptable. Savannah's gentle acceptance offers an alternative model of intimacy, one based not on performance but presence. She doesn't rush to label or fix, she simply stays. In that stillness, the film reminds us that the purest form of love, queer or otherwise, is to be seen and still chosen. For lesbian viewers, this becomes a mirror of the delicate hope that comes with being honest, the risk of rejection balanced against the yearning for connection. The scene also exposes how society's discomfort with women loving women persists, not because it's unnatural, but because it disrupts the narratives we've been taught to accept. The girls' emotional closeness challenges a cultural script that equates female intimacy with danger or scandal. Even now, depictions like this one can make audiences uneasy, not because of what they show, but because of what they refuse to hide: tenderness, vulnerability, and the possibility that love between women doesn't need to apologize for existing. The discomfort, the lingering social tension, reveals how far we still have to go in accepting that women's emotional and romantic lives are not for the male gaze to interpret. This scene reclaims that space. It says, "This is ours." Veronica represents the emotional residue of a culture that punishes difference. She carries the scars of being outed, of having her truth turned into gossip. Savannah, in contrast, represents what the world could be: open, unafraid, curious. Together, they form a symbolic dialogue between past and future. When Savannah listens, she isn't just comforting a friend, she's dismantling the learned reflex to treat queerness as a confession. She's modeling what acceptance looks like when it's real. Their connection becomes a small act of repair, not just for Veronica, but for every queer woman who has been told her story is too heavy to hold. What's striking is how the film resists the temptation to turn this into a grand revelation. There's no music swell, no dramatic lighting shift. Instead, it trusts silence. It lets two girls be enough. That restraint makes the moment feel more authentic, more grounded in lived experience. Because for most queer people, there are no fireworks when we find safety, just an exhale we've been holding for years. The scene becomes a cinematic exhale, a soft sigh of recognition that says, "I see you. I've been there." For queer women who grew up hiding parts of themselves, it feels like a homecoming. There's also something deeply feminist in how the film frames this conversation. It refuses to separate queerness from womanhood, to treat it as an add-on or deviation. Instead, it roots it in the broader struggle of being a woman in a world that polices emotion and identity alike. The way Veronica's story intertwines with her mother's reputation hints at generational trauma, the inherited shame that women pass down not because they want to, but because society leaves them no choice. In sharing her truth with Savannah, Veronica breaks that cycle. She learns that her past doesn't have to dictate her future, and in doing so, gives the audience permission to do the same. By the end of their exchange, something unspoken but undeniable has shifted. They are no longer just teammates or classmates, they are witnesses to each other's becoming. The laughter that follows their confessions feels lighter, freer, as though the room itself has exhaled. It's not about whether they'll fall in love. It's about the possibility that love, in whatever form it takes, can exist without shame. For queer viewers, that's the revolution. Ultimately, this scene is about reclamation, of voice, of safety, of the right to exist without apology. It's about finding home in another person, not because they complete you, but because they remind you that you were never broken. It's about the courage it takes for women to tell the truth in a world that prefers them silent. And in its quiet, unhurried way, the scene dares to imagine what healing looks like. Not grand, not loud, but real. When Veronica and Savannah share that small, knowing smile at the end, it feels like the beginning of something bigger than either of them. It feels like hope.